And now, broadcasting live from Las Vegas, the Snake Sports Talk Show with Jake Silva starts now.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, here we go on a Wednesday. We are in the middle of the week, Thursday night football tomorrow. This is the Snake Sports Talk Show. We got a lot to really unpack and really talk about. Baseball postseason doesn't get any better than this. So we got a lot to really break down wherever and however you may be watching and listening. Thanks for making us a part of your day. Chase joining us. Chase, I think we have witnessed, I don't know if this is the end, because we've got a problem in Houston. I ain't talking about the Texans. It's a serious problem because those Tigers were on the prowl here today. So, wow. I
am excited to see Houston out of the playoffs. Like, you have no idea. They've been to the ALCS for 4 straight years. Actually, more than that, like probably 5 or 6 straight years.
7 years.
They've been to the World Series. They've been to the World Series like countless times over the past few years, and it's been ridiculous seeing them in there. And I'm just glad that the Tigers were able to step up enough to where they had beaten the Houston Astros, but let's not have them step up enough to where they win the next series, because they are against my Cleveland Guardians to face off for the ALCS. So we got to make sure that the Tigers lose 3 straight games in the ALDS, and then, they can ride their season off with on a good note there.
I will tell you what. So we're going to start with that here. So down goes the Houston Astros. I couldn't even believe it myself. I mean, Chase and I, we've been covering this thing for a long time with Major League Baseball, and today was not a good day for a lot of Houston Astro fans. I feel like this was kind of the ending look. And as of right now and what it appears, this is what it is. And again, I feel for a lot of a lot of people who honestly, they're diehard fans of this team. And for a 7-year stretch, okay, let's not forget about that. This is a 7-year stretch we're talking about here. So the Houston Astros, and listen, growing up for years, this Astros organization had not been at its peak as to what it has been like right now. And so when I look at this team, I mean, this team was unbelievable from the start. And now, after what I witnessed just early on, 7 years, it has been for a stretch. I watched this team be at its worst. Okay, one of their best players, I've heard it all over. Hunter Pence, Lance Berkman, Brian Bogusevic. At a time when they did not have their stars. Okay, when Hunter Pence and Lance Berkman and Michael Bourne and multiple other players, they have come out of this organization. Hell, even when we had Billy Wagner, Jeff Bagwell, Craig Biggio, so many other great players. Okay, they were at its worst. And it wasn't until their front offices, they changed. They got a new GM. They ended up hiring a manager to manage this team. And now at that point, I remember when they had Bo Porter as their manager. And at that time, you had names like Brian Bogusevic, Jason Castro, Matt Dominguez, so many other, players that were like no-namers to people. And that was initially with what it was for the Houston Astros. And again, I feel bad in some ways. But listen, I'm not going to, raise hell and all the rest of it because they went down. I'm not going to do that. But what I will tell you is that this was a team for the longest time where their successes, I mean, you cannot compare it for the longest time. I've seen this now for years and years. And I truthfully was impressed with how they came out. I mean, they were on a 7-year stretch. And at that time, think about it. They had the most horrible regular season records. They ended up with the top 5 draft picks for like 5-year stretch, maybe even longer than that. So that's where Carlos Correa, George Springer, Alex Bregman, and even Jose Altuve in 2011. Okay, they had the longest stretch where they had the worst record in baseball. It was bad. You want to say that, like, you want to clown on the Chicago White Sox for one really bad season? This was years of really bad years for the Houston Astros. And that wasn't until they moved out of the National League to go to the American League, because that was what they were years ago. Then they moved to the National League. Then they moved right back into the American League. And then that's when things really started to change. But at that time, they also made some very smart trading moves. They ended up getting, Yordan Alvarez. They ended up getting Justin Verlander. They had, they also had, many other players that have come into this organization. And man, were they just fun to watch. But I will tell you one thing. I know the controversial thing, because listen, if you are the fans, if you're the kind of fans that were really praying for their downfall, you must be the same fans who are right now kind of crossing your fingers that you are praying for the Kansas City Chiefs downfall. This is literally with what it was with the Houston Astros in the baseball world. People were tired of this team. But you have to put things into context. They were very bad initially. Then they started getting better with all their draft picks and so much more with that. And that's where it really came into fruition. That's where things really started to change up. And you know what? You got to think about it. Boy, wasn't it a fun stretch. And listen, everybody could go back and say, well, what about the time they smashed the trash cans and they cheated? Well, yeah, that was years and years of that narrative where it just got annoying. Because here's the thing. You know that any Dodger fan, I had to explain this to my old man who's a diehard Dodger fan and felt like at the time he was in the heat of the moment where he felt like the Dodgers got screwed out of a World Series championship because of this whole thing and felt like, oh, they should have awarded it to the Dodgers. You know what that's like? That's like saying you want to, honestly, and I don't want to sound like morbid when I say this, but it's almost sounding like you want to literally have your hands, your prints on a tainted, on a stained championship. It's almost like you're in a murder scene and like you either have the weapon and then you're putting all your fingerprints up on it. I don't want to touch that. Are you kidding me? That's crazy. That's absurd. Honestly, it was the right thing to do for Major League Baseball to put an asterisk there. Okay, I would not award it to the Dodgers who got their asses handed to. Okay, I'm not going to do that. Initially, the Dodgers, we know they won in a shutdown year where it was only a short year in COVID. Okay, we all remember that in 2020. But when you put a full season up on your belt, that's what matters most. Okay, we saw that from many other teams, the Braves, the Astros, the Texas Rangers. So my thing with the Astros, they had multitudes of very good players. And there were times where you were happy for the organization, and then there was a time where you hated the organization. And listen, I don't blame you. I remember the time when, all that stuff came out. I lost respect for Jim Crane. I lost total respect for Carlos Correa. But at the end of the day, like the NFL always stands for, is not for long. Dynasties do not last forever. And this is a 7-year stretch with the Houston Astros. And listen, I'm going to give credit to the Detroit Tigers. Their manager was the former Astros manager, A.J. Hinch. How do you think he felt getting the payback against his former club? He had to sit out managing for a year, but was brave enough to come out, speak his piece, and in the end, he took the capital punishment and went with it until he was ready to manage again. Now you have a young Tigers team, and listen, put some respect up on them, because this is a team that looks pretty scrappy next to the Kansas City Royals, who, by the way, took down a very young and hungry and a team that we thought could have been an ALCS favorite, the Baltimore Orioles. They took them down today. Listen, put some respect on the hungry underdogs today. But I just feel like with the Houston Astros, what a 7-year stretch. I mean, there was love, there was hate, and there was everything in between. But the only thing that you can respect upon is that, look, like dynasties, I know all of you are praying for Kansas City's downfall in the NFL. And listen, who knows when that day will be, but I'm not going to be, disrespectful. I'm also not going to be kind of like, that the Cheesemo guy that's just going to be like, I'm still fixated on the cheating scandal in 2017. Get over yourself. It's 2024. The only thing that is that talent and, consistency, it changes all the time. And right now you just saw that with the Detroit Tigers. They sweep them. They're going on to the next series in the division series. I think it would be interesting, but Chase knows it best because, my thing is the Cleveland Guardians, I can't ever figure them out, but you know what? They are a damn good team, and we can give it to them. All right. I want to bring this up because we know that this was obviously a story that was brought up, at the middle of the break, but Davante Adams has now requested a trade out of Las Vegas because right now things are looking really bad. The turmoil is starting to really heat up. Listen, look at all the NFL teams in the span of 4 weeks. Have you noticed the point differentials have been cut in half in 4 weeks versus what happened last year or the year before that with offenses? And these were teams that we know that had star receivers, teams that had star quarterbacks, or maybe. These were teams that, initially, defensively and situationally, were not as tested. We love offense. We love fantasy football. We love scoring points. Davante Adams is he's a one-of-a-kind player. But here's the only thing is, take a look at some of the teams that do not have a star receiver. How about the Buffalo Bills? You all kept crying to me saying that, they lost Stephon Diggs. They got no weapons. No problem. Josh Allen is him. And he seems to be working with Khalil Shakir and with Keon Coleman. And he has a run game with James Cook. Well, what about the Chargers? Well, the difference of it is that the offensive coordinator, he's heavy on the run. But we know that it's a culture change. And at least the Chargers are 2-2 in the bye week. Okay, things changed from there. And we know Herbert has a frustration, but in the end, we're not going to end up spending nickel and dime for a star receiver. Think about it this way. Tyreek Hill, initially when he came to the Kansas City Chiefs, right, when he first started his career there, that was when Alex Smith was quarterback. Patrick Mahomes had not elevated his game yet. Once Patrick Mahomes came up with Andy Reid, a smart offensive coach, the rest of the tale is told. Okay, Tyreek Hill only won one Super Bowl with the Chiefs. One. Now, in Miami, because he chased for the money, wanted to be the greatest player, non-quarterback ever in the NFL. And trust me, he's very talented. I'm not going to take that away from him. Everybody voted him as the number one player out of the top 100. Players did. Okay? Because players love that kind of stuff. But they're going to brush away Patrick Mahomes, who with no receivers. Now he lost another one, Rashee Rice. but yet the Chiefs continue to win. The Chiefs continue to win Super Bowls. They are not fixated on a superstar wide receiver that they're going to spend nickel and dime for because he's pivotal to an offense. These teams that have great coaches, who have great GMs, and who have a great quarterback, everything else will figure itself out. It is the relief system. You have a star quarterback, when you have a coach, when you have a GM, everything else just is simple and it makes sense. Davante Adams, okay, from the years he was in Green Bay, he had Aaron Rodgers, the golden arm, the golden child. It was a great offense. Aaron Rodgers, once, Jordy Nelson and Randall Cobb, once they passed up over, Davante Adams arrived in the scene, and the next thing you know, he's a lot better than we thought he was, especially in the tenure in Fresno State. He became arguably one of the top best wide receivers at his position. Then, because of all the turmoil with Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay wanted to ship him out of town really quickly. And then Davante now gets traded out of Green Bay, a stable organization, goes to a much more turmoil organization in the Las Vegas Raiders because Davante wanted to reunite with his old college teammate, Derek Carr, who's now on the Saints. And how that happened was because you were one possession away, from getting into the division series. Okay, you were almost there in the divisional round. And unfortunately, Cincinnati stopped you by one possession. Yeah. And then that year when Davante Adams went there, do you know how many Raider fans rode him out of town so badly? It was bad. Really bad. So once Derek Carr now got written off, and you decided to end up bringing in Jimmy Garoppolo and Josh McDaniels, and it still turned into turmoil. Listen, I like Davante Adams. I really do. But receivers these days have been narrowed as the divas of the league. Look at Antonio Brown or Le'Veon Bell in Pittsburgh. You know how many times they've had so many noisy situations that people in Pittsburgh were like, all right, that's it. Get it out of here. They did. Shipped Le'Veon Bell to the Jets. Look where that got him. And then they shipped Antonio Brown to the Raiders. We all know the history from there, don't we? Davante Adams had no animosity towards Green Bay, but I think because the turmoil of Aaron Rodgers and how he was feeling kind of influenced a bit of it where he wanted out. And then he goes to the Raiders, reunites, happy to be with his teammate for 1 year. The Raiders shipped him out of town. Now Davante is pissed. It just goes to show you that the league does not rely on superstar wide receivers to win Super Bowls. They rely on GMs. They rely on coaches. They rely on franchise quarterbacks. And the quarterbacks will make the rest of it. And all you need to have is a healthy offensive line. You need to have a competent defense, at least with the best defensive coordinating minds there. But wide receivers are proving to you, and especially to running backs, yes, you do need to have a healthy run game. Okay, that's what makes the offense as a whole. But them alone, solely, does not win you Super Bowls. Patrick Mahomes won one Super Bowl with Tyreek Hill. Once Tyreek took his money in Miami, now look at that turmoil because they're on their third string quarterback. And here's Patrick Mahomes, 2 Super Bowls later. You understand where I'm going with this. I like Davante Adams, and I think initially going to the Raiders and with the Raiders culture and with the Raiders history, they have not been the same organization probably since the days of, like, I don't know, late 70s, 80s, even at their time, around in the 90s, 2000s. They were not the same organization. For years and years, they've been trying to find their franchise quarterback. And right now, you are seeing so much of this frustration with Davante Adams. But this is what happens when the financial stuff gets involved and you go to a destination that has not had a longer track record of winning. Not since their golden years at that time period. So I think Davante Adams, I figure he may end up going to a competitive team. But if you were looking for draft capital, and this is where I kind of look at the Raiders dead in the eye, and my only thing is you get yourself draft capital. You already have receivers. You have Jacoby Myers, you got Trey Tucker, and you could probably go and get another one in the draft if you wanted to. But the last thing you want to do is trade away Max Crosby, who is your franchise, because he gives you defense every single Sunday, 110%. So last thing I want to do is a voice in the franchise. I want to give him away. I think you have some value with Davante while he's still healthy and while he's still good to play at age 31. But I'd say a second, third, and probably a fifth rounder, whatever draft capital that you can get up on it. I think that's at least the best thing you can do, because look at your situation. You need a quarterback. You probably also need some more offensive line. Also need more defensive pieces. But people that want to write off Antonio Pierce, you really think that he had a lot of this involvement? There's a difference between having a love for a player and then making the right business decisions so that the team can be relevant again. Okay? Davante Adams will find a home. We'll be fine. But we kind of had a feeling this was not a relationship that was meant to be long term. I mean, Chase, I could tell you one thing. Like, I am seeing every single team. Like, again, people keep nagging on the fact that, like, the Bills are without wide receivers. But yet when it comes to Josh Allen, who is winning these games without superstar wide receivers, all you've got is Khalil Shakir and Keon Coleman, and yet you're 3-1. Like, when you're 3-1, and yeah, you may have lost that game to Baltimore pretty badly, but I don't narrow it as you're a terrible team. I ain't going to do that. But I think the one thing you have to realize is that this is one that I just think for many people, like, you got to realize it doesn't matter. Like, at the end of the day, it does not matter. It doesn't matter if you have a star wide receiver. What matters is can you win the games without your star wide receiver? And we have seen teams do this. We have. The Bills are one of them. Right now, I think because of offensive coordinating struggles, I know right now, the Chargers are not particularly in a position to where they could be the team that honestly could change a lot of things, but you could tell you have a star quarterback and you have the right coach and you have the right GM. It's different for everybody. So it's just different. So we ran into a little bit of technical difficulties. Hopefully Chase will be back up on here, but I just think it's interesting. I'm just watching every single one of these teams right now. And some of these teams have a star wide receiver, but are dealing with quarterback issues. Okay. And then there are some that don't, yet still have the quarterback, but they seem to be winning games. I mean, Chiefs right now, it's not looking pretty, but they're winning. So, and they're doing it now without Hollywood Brown, and they're doing it without Rashee Rice. So they're doing this now with their rookie, Xavier Worthy. You still got Travis Kelce, who ended up getting, he started coming alive this past week. So you're still getting that. But I got to tell you, though, it's pretty impressive when you can see that when you have the coach, quarterback, and GM, and everything else just works perfectly. It just makes a ton of sense. It really, really, really does. But yeah, can't begin to tell you just how good that honestly feels when you have that kind of feeling for coach and quarterback. All right. Got lots to talk about. Going to be talking a little bit more about postseason baseball from here, but yeah. Tigers, they sweep the Astros, and for the first time since 2016, they will not be headed to the ALCS, which is really impressive about the Tigers. The Kansas City Royals, they upset the Baltimore Orioles. And a team young and could not figure it out. So the Royals are headed now to the division series. And as of right now, we've got the Mets and the Brewers. Mets are winning 3-0, who are leading the series. And then there's the Braves and the Padres, where the Padres are leading the series as well. So you are seeing some scrappy teams there. And whomever ends up facing against the Yankees, the Guardians, the Dodgers, and the Phillies, it's going to be an interesting one. But, man, we are all for it for postseason baseball. All right, well, while postseason baseball is around the corner, is going on right now, and also the NFL season, because Thursday Night Football returns tomorrow, BetUS is always there for you 24/7 with one of their best sports books in the country for 30 years. BetUS has been doing this for a long time, giving you the best guarantees, match bonuses, and also, not to mention, the best of the best account managers for you to get the best experience that you want and need all season long. BetUS, best sports book in the country, gives you all the best betting lines from single to parlay leg bets, maybe prop bets if you're into that. Also, casino entertainment. Always so good, but BetUS has you covered all season long. Only when you put $50 or more into your deposit, matching it up to 125% bonuses, up to $2,000, only makes it more the fun all NFL season long and Major League Baseball postseason long, because it is October, baby, so it is fun times. You don't want to miss out on a lot of these contests going on right now. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER, or also call the number in your respective states. Seek therapy and seek help as you need to, because we don't want you to gamble recklessly. We want you to gamble responsibly and get the best experience while using BetUS. BetUS, where the game begins.
Looking for a show with the best takes and opinions? Want a show with the best coverage around the world of sports? Jam-packed with an all-star interview lineup? Then the best place to find it all, sports and entertainment, is right here. Join Jake Silva on the Snake Sports Talk Show, presented by SeatGeek and BetUS. Weeknights at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 Pacific on Sports Wave Network.
Check out the Con Man live on the Sports Corner, coming to a screen near you, giving you the greatest stories from basketball legends you've never seen before. Sharing their glory, building the toughness, and how they show off their swag. But only one man knows all that, and that's the Con Man. Join Michael Conceição, the Con Man, at the Sports Corner, Fridays at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 Pacific, on Sportsway Network.
All right. Well, postseason baseball is officially here, and we just talked about it with the Houston Astros. And I will say it has been very exciting thus far. I have not put up together my top 10 of teams because we're in the wild card series. I think after once we figure out our victors from here, I think it would be very it'd be reasonable to end up doing our top 10 of postseason teams that I think ranking them, what I see from just their roster, from where their current state is, as a whole. So I felt like, and here's what's funny about this. So the Braves and the Mets made it into the postseason, outwent the Arizona Diamondbacks. They did not make it in. And so far, we've already got the Tigers beating the Astros, upsetting the dynasty run for 7 years with this organization. And then we had the Kansas City Royals upsetting one of the youngest, and I also felt like one of the best teams in the American League for quite some time. But this is what postseason baseball is all about. It's about turning off the regular season mentality and going into the October mode. Because this is where it does not matter what your regular season stats are. The question is, can you overcome a lot of those adversities to then win those matchups that and there have always been your top dominating teams, the Yankees, the Dodgers, we've been seeing right now the Cleveland Guardians. I wouldn't say the same about the Philadelphia Phillies, only because they have been in some spurts of a funk of their own. I'm not surprised at Philadelphia. But then there are the surprising teams, and this happens all the time in Major League Baseball. You just saw it with the Detroit Tigers. I think if I am looking at this right now with the Mets, because if they come away with this, they already came away with the win in the previous game. But if they come away with a win tonight, that could be a surprising team. Because the Brewers, you got to think about it. They were on a big-time momentum late in the stretch. And this is a team who also gave away their star pitcher to the team that just lost to the Kansas City Royals. And so anything can happen in Major League Baseball. It's not like in the NFL where, you have the obvious dominating teams. I mean, we've seen this for years. We know with the Baltimore Ravens, they were the obvious team until Kansas City ended up taking them down. Nobody thought Kansas City would end up pulling off the year that they did without star receivers and at a time where they were very much exposed. But they beat the Dolphins, they beat the Bills, and they beat the Ravens. And then in a stacked team like the San Francisco 49ers, they beat them in the Super Bowl. And that was the chance for every NFL team to beat them. And they failed. In hockey, it's a little different. You're in a 7-game series. There are teams that were deemed, quote unquote, scrappy. And honestly, I felt like the New York Rangers had a shot because they were very consistent. They were scoring more, and they were also playing very good quality defense with Igor Shesterkin, who was literally playing out of his mind. And then, unfortunately, down went them when the Florida Panthers caught fire, and there they went. And nobody expected the Edmonton Oilers to play the way they did, because normally in a lot of past histories, they either missed the playoffs, they were first-round exits, or they did not get far enough. And sure enough, they made it into the Western Conference Final, made it into the Stanley Cup Final, and finally we saw Connor McDavid in the final for once. Now, in the postseason, aren't we just happy? that we get a chance to see Shohei Ohtani in the postseason for the first time ever since he left the Angels to sign with the Dodgers. It is a great feeling. I can't figure out the Cleveland Guardians. I really can't, because they are a team that had always been middle of the pack for a long time. I remember in 2016, they were a surprising team, by the way. A surprising team that caught fire and then initially made it, I think, one of the most memorable World Series that I think we've ever had between them and the Cubs. It was very memorable. These teams exist. This is why this is not something that's obvious during postseason. It never is. There are teams that show dominance, Yankees, Dodgers, and there are teams that show surprises. And so far, Kansas City and Detroit and potentially the Mets are showing spurts of surprises. All you can do is sit back, get your popcorn, and enjoy some postseason baseball. Let's go. Chase with the news.
This is the Hot Press.
I got to tell you, man, I mean, that just showed incredibly that, look, dynasties do not last forever. And
especially in baseball, since it's one of the most, I always say baseball is the most unpredictable sport you will ever find out there, because
indeed,
there is new teams that pop up every year. A wild card team could easily go and make it all the way to the World Series. I mean, if you can go back to 2001 when the Seattle Mariners won 112 games that season and got beat by the 89-win New York Yankees and went on to win the World Series that year. The Yankees did. So it's very possible. The Guardians, however, you said that they're very hard to pinpoint. Well, they've been good since 2013 when Terry Francona took over that team.
Yep.
Terry Francona took over. They ended up making the playoffs that year. Missed it in 14, made it in 15, and then in 16 they had that magical World Series run where they ended up having a 22-game win streak. The record was 25 games straight win, so we were 3 games away from that. And it was just, we had great pitching, great hitting, and now Stephen Vogt, his first year as the Guardians manager after Terry Francona leaves, he takes over. First time ever being a big league manager. Never managed before. He kept the pitching coach, the hitting coach, and one of the base coaches, and that was it. Everybody else was new on the staff. We ended up having new guys come up from the minors, traded for Alex Cobb and Lane Thomas in mid-season, and that was it. Those were the only acquisitions that we had. And our pitching has been dominant in the bullpen. We've got the best bullpen in Major League Baseball, arguably the best closer with a .64 ERA, and he was second in saves by only 2, and he has led in saves the past 2 seasons. So I'm telling you what, this Guardians team is going to be looking for vengeance when it comes to trying to take out the Tigers in this next series, and I am excited for it.
I mean, I will tell you what, with an AL Central familiarity, it is going to be an interesting matchup nonetheless, because you're talking about a Tigers team that had a Triple Crown pitching winner in Tarik Skubal, and you know what's funny? Since he got called back up to the major, Spencer Torkelson, has he not looked like in his best form since then? And you know what's funny? We had in our show previously a fellow Tigers insider in Locked On Tigers, where we were talking about this. We thought this team would have just acquired draft capital, would have at the very least have gotten some of the best prospects up out there, because we knew that this was a future. But then something just turned and it clicked, and the team started believing, and they started winning these games. It was just what's funny is and it's funny because you could have a month of momentum going into this thing, but then you could also have the surprising times where you're just kind of riding this train ride. And what's funny is we did this all the time I take, for instance, like when we watch March Madness, there's some of those programs that we never really paid attention to for quite some time. And then all of a sudden they end up in the Sweet 16 or the Elite 8. And it's like, where did this story really come from? You know what I mean? And that was where it was just like, it's the most exciting thing during the month of March. But, you know, when I look at the Tigers, I mean, that had to have felt good for A.J. Hinch, who was a part of this organization, took a year off because of the whole scandal and the cheating incident. And again, he took it very, very proudly. You know, he did not retaliate. He took it, moved forward with it, and then he came back as manager. And I've said it. I said, give it time for this team to really find their groove. And sure enough, I think they've been riding it. But, you know, in past history, we saw this with the 14 Kansas City Royals. Okay, they were a team that was hanging on for as long as they possibly could. They go into that wild card game, which you remember it, how crazy that was against the Oakland A's, and all it took was one swing from Salvador Perez, and then they just were on this momentum train all the way through until they faced off against the Giants in 14, where that was one of my favorite World Series watching it, because it didn't have to involve home runs. It was quality pitching. It was getting into pitchers' heads, and all you had to do was get on base and score those runs all the way to 7 games. Like that,
and they beat the Mets in 2015.
It was incredible, and they picked up right where they left off. So there are those surprising teams that just I mean, the Diamondbacks last year. I mean, did anybody have the Diamondbacks literally going to the World Series? At the time when they took down the Dodgers, they take down the Phillies, and then they're met up with the Texas Rangers, which everybody was all like, oh, it was a boring World Series. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm like, this was a team who has not been in the World Series since 2001. And then you go into a Texas Rangers team, which everybody remembers the back-to-back years of 10 and 11, where they lost both those World Series, and then they rewrite the script this past year, and they finally win one for the organization. And I mean, Bruce Bochy had it best, you know? So that's why I'm like, those surprising teams exist.
Oh, yeah.
Just
and I'm glad that Texas won it last year. It was their first ever in their franchise history, and it was deserved for them.
I felt so happy because here's the thing. They were tired of hearing the nonsense from Houston down there, just getting noisy, and the Rangers in Arlington. I mean, they're staring at the Dallas Cowboys, who had not won a Super Bowl since '95, and they're just like, look, we're trying to play our part. And then, sure enough, they rode that momentum train, and they finally bring one to Arlington for the first time in their franchise history. Like, good for them. That's why
Do you know when the last time was the Guardians won the World Series?
Oh, God, I think it was 48?
1948. Satchel Paige was our starting pitcher that year.
We thought in 2016 it was getting close enough. But, I mean, you got to think about it.
Our starting pitcher got injured. It was Trevor Bauer cut up his finger.
Yep.
And then a month prior in September, Carlos Carrasco had a line drive hit right back at his wrist. He broke his wrist, and he wasn't able to pitch in the World Series because of that game. And Danny Salazar was coming off an injury, but he was a bullpen guy. And I'm telling you what, when he came in with those 3 innings – or 4 or 5 innings for the bullpen, I feel like he could have been a starter. I'm like, why did we not start this man for one game? Because Corey Kluber, pitching your starting pitcher 3 games, like the first game, the 4th game, and then the 7th game.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to hit off of him eventually, and it took the 7th game for them to light him up.
I mean, that's the thing, is that like Corey Kluber was initially almost riding the same momentum as Madison Bumgarner was with the Giants initially.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of hard because the fact that they overused him as they did, and you know, again, it was fun, you know, but sometimes when you get to a point where you overuse one player that you know is like, yeah, he is the heart and soul of that pitching staff at that time. Sometimes it's like one of those games was bound to happen, and sure enough, it did. But yeah, this is interesting, man. Tigers, Indians, or Tigers, Guardians, Royals, and I just Royals and Yankees. Wow.
Yeah.
I don't even think we had a matchup between Royals and Yankees in the postseason in a long time, did we?
It's been a long time. I know that we've had the Royals and Mets. We've had them in the World Series. So
we did, and I'm like almost thinking, this had to have been a very long time, because I'm almost having to retract to like back to the George Brett years.
And
I'm like,
the thing is, like, the Yankees have home field advantage all the way through the playoffs, unless they lose. And then the Guardians have the home field advantage versus the Tigers because they had the second best record in baseball.
Now that's hard. And I'm like, so we shall see. We shall see indeed. We got any news brewing up for us here today?
Yeah. So a lot of Browns players, Naheem Hines, Nick Chubb, all reported back. David Njoku, and a couple offensive linemen have all reported back to practice and are playing this week, except for Chubb. I think they're going to give him about a week before they throw him either into the Eagles game or maybe the following week when they throw him into the Bengals game.
All right.
And then we also have Michael Hall is serving a 5-game suspension from what I was told, him being on the commissioner's exempt list for the 4 games that he was on. I think that he's eligible to come back for the Eagles game next week, since this will be his 5th game. And then Von Miller suspended for the league's personal conduct policy. That is insane. And then last but not least, Rashee Rice. We do not know if it is a fully torn ACL or not, because they have hesitated to come out with the injury report because they're getting multiple tests done because they think that he could very well be back and it might not be a torn ACL.
Well, that's interesting because if, God forbid, that's not a torn ACL, then the Kansas City Chiefs would have dodged a massive bullet from there. Now, again, we just talked about, because we're getting a lot of the news now where wide receivers, keep your eyes out on some teams because there are some wide receivers that could be dumped off this trade deadline. And there are some teams.
And Davante Adams.
Yep. And I'm hearing Amari Cooper's name being thrown up out there. I'm hearing DeAndre Hopkins' name getting thrown out there. So there are some value there, but at what price? So this is going to be interesting. But yeah, I think if the Chiefs, if they luck out with Rashee Rice, that would be just incredible. I know they've been waiting a long time with the test results, but I didn't even hear about this hesitation, which is insane.
Yeah, no, it's true. They're hesitating because they want to get thorough analysis and thorough checkups done because they want to make sure that if it is a sprain, that's great because it's only a 4-game or like anywhere from 2 to 4 games that he'll miss. Yeah. And if it's a ACL tear, then he's out for the season. But they don't want to come out and say it's a torn ACL and then him be able to actually play or not. So that is very interesting. And Amari Cooper, I've been hearing his name thrown around in trade talks, but I've also been hearing that the Browns have been asking about DeAndre Hopkins and Davante Adams and the price that it would take to get either of them off their teams and everything.
Now that one is interesting because I want to start with DeAndre Hopkins because here's my thing is that, this would be a potential reunion between him and Deshaun Watson.
Yeah.
But the only question that I have is if you were to do this, are you going to be getting the same, similarly to what it was in the past from the time in Houston? Or does this kind of just defeat its purpose here?
I mean, I think it would be great because he still has the speed, he still has the hands, and he still got the route running ability. But the thing is, if you get DeAndre Hopkins in there and you're able to keep Amari Cooper, that means we can move Jerry Jeudy to a slot position and we don't have to keep him outside. You have DeAndre on one side on the outside, Amari on the other on the outside, Jerry Jeudy on the inside, Elijah Moore on the inside, and now you got David Njoku to streak up the middle of the field if you need him to get wide open. That'll help open up our offense and get what we've actually been searching for this year. Same thing with Devontae Adams. We'll do the exact same thing. We'll put him on one side, Cooper on the other, Jerry Jeudy and Elijah Moore at the slot positions, and then David Njoku up the middle to cover any of the middle of the field or even the like slant or the flats or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then now you got Nick Chubb coming back. Like, I would love to have another wide receiver that is dynamic, explosive, and the ability to catch and run routes and stuff, because it would honestly help our offense get to where we need it to be.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, look at a lot of these teams. I mean, you're thinking of the Bills could definitely end up adding a receiver if they wanted to, because I mean, they stretched out that cap for as much as they could with getting rid of those old existing contracts. And the other thing is too, I mean, they've been at a point where, I mean, they're 3-1 right now. Now they could be looking at some defensive help, but they're another team that could use a wide receiver. You know, at least add on to the momentum that they have right now with Khalil Shakir and Keon Coleman. They could if they really wanted to. I mean, you can never go wrong with adding another receiver if you wanted.
The Commanders, the Jets,
are another
the
one.
Cowboys, like there's so many options for Devontae or any other wide receiver. I mean, if the Dolphins keep losing, they might upload Tyreek Hill somewhere.
Oh, there's plenty of options. There's plenty of options about that. But, you know, again, I just am curious to see. I mean, we got week 5 coming up, but I'm just curious to see what may end up happening with at least some of these receivers when we get to that trade deadline. I truthfully think it's going to be interesting.
Which is November 5th. They extended it one more week this year. So.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah,
all right.
It's November 5th instead of like October 26th or something.
That was my thought. I thought it was usually late October for this, but we're getting another month. That means a whole month. You get another
week. Yep, another week that are extending it to, because it's usually the last week of October. But now, I think what
that's just about mid-season, ain't it? Like just about.
Just about, yeah. So they ended up extending it because there's been a lot of like people that have been looking after their bye weeks, or like seeing how injuries play out, or like, you know, like who is in contention truly and who's not at that point in time, and that gives them a better look going 1 week later. And they discussed it during the meetings this offseason, so they pushed it back to November 5th.
That's going to be interesting. We got a lot to really kind of break down for at least another month before we can kind of figure out who's going, who's staying, and whatnot. All right. Face of the news.
This is the Hot Press.
So here's an interesting thing I just kind of found before we wrap things up here up on the show. But apparently, so Jeremy Fowler, a very good insider, wrote this. He's a senior NFL national reporter, very, very good writer. He came out and there was insights into the Stephon Diggs and Buffalo Bills divorce. Now, right now, Diggs, as you could clearly tell, he's in a good situation with the Houston Texans. I mean, I'm not going to take anything away from it. But the Bills are 3-1. And the thing about it with Stephon Diggs, and I've been saying this, Chase is my witness, I've said it here on the program, that we pulled up a percentage stat because there were parts of it were in the regular season. Okay, the Bills, when Stephon Diggs, when he's fed the ball more, here's a stat that may shock some of you. So last year, when Stephon Diggs was scoring, and when Stephon Diggs was fed the ball more rather than spreading the ball out than what Josh Allen has been doing thus far. So when he was fed this, the Bills were 5-5. Okay, when he was fed the ball more than everybody else on the receiving core. You know what it was when he barely broke the 100-yard receiving mark and only was counted one touchdown? The Bills were 6-1.
Oh, I was close.
So everybody that has been saying, oh, the Bills can't do it without Stephon Diggs. Jeremy Fowler came out with this. And he said this. It was neither the biggest nor the most memorable play of the Bills' 23 season. Ahead 10-7 late in the second quarter at the Philadelphia Eagles in Week 12, where Josh Allen took the 3rd and 6 shotgun snap from the 13-yard line. Remember this game? Glanced left, then to the right slot, where he knew exactly which player he would find. Stephon Diggs had found a tiny hole in the Eagles zone and at the goal line, which is where necessarily low and perfect throw found him hiding in the lane between safety Kevin Byard and linebacker Zach Cunningham. It was a touchdown. And it was a double digit. So the thing that I thought which was interesting is like you have this. Now, the Texans and the Bills are facing off this week. So mind you, there's going to be a lot of that here. The Bills, let me just kind of pull up a stat here. I want to pull up a stat on the Bills because I think this was very interesting here and what we've seen in 4 weeks. So we know with what they were when Stephon Diggs was on this roster. Okay, they were 11-6, made the playoffs, but then were not as good in the playoffs. They lost to the Chiefs. Now, this year, in 4 weeks, the Bills are scoring 30.5 points per game. This is without Stephon Diggs. 30.5 points per game. Averaging 20.8 per opponent. Now, defensively, it's a little bit of a different change here. They have 73 total first downs. Their fourth down is 6 for 6. And, Josh Allen, here's the yards per pass attempt. It's about 7.9. So they're still passing the ball and spreading it. Now, passing yards may be a little bit different. I mean, they're almost there to the 200 mark. But 7 passing touchdowns and 0 interceptions. While there is 7 rushing touchdowns on the run game. So total offensive yards right now, they are already at the 1,200 mark. Usually the Bills were desperate for Stephon Diggs. It seems to me that Brandon Beane, the GM, and Sean McDermott, the head coach, all have full trust in Josh Allen. And this is what Josh said. Like I said, like I said in the beginning, if you trust Josh Allen, and you trust with how he produces, then he is going to take however this franchise goes. That's what he's going to do. So to me, Josh Allen is the franchise. And you know that with some quarterbacks, like Patrick Mahomes is the franchise. But he has a great coach, and he has a great supporter in Travis Kelce. The Chiefs, they've built around that. Now, there are some teams that are built around their franchise quarterbacks, which that is their franchise. Now, we're seeing a lot of franchises that we think they're the franchise guys. Like, we think Dak Prescott is the Cowboys franchise, but look at what's happening with them right now.
Yeah.
We think Jalen Hurts is the Eagles franchise quarterback, but he's turned over prone this year. So there's a lot of we thinks right now, but there are quarterbacks that we are very sure is their franchise quarterback, and that is Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. So this game between Houston and Buffalo, I mean, if Buffalo, like I'm looking at right now, because if I had to look at the point spread, Buffalo is favored by -1. They are the favorite, not Houston. So what that tells you is what I'm looking at from Vegas's bet books. They trust Josh Allen more than the Texans' front-loaded roster.
Yep.
It's gonna be an interesting matchup, Chase. Like I just think this game in particular is going to prove whether or not that if you had a Stephon Diggs on this roster, would you still be able to be a competitive team? If Josh Allen wins this week, this whole narrative of Stephon Diggs would be wiped clean. They won't talk about it anymore. So, Bills-Texans this Sunday. Interesting.
And I'm excited for that. It's going to be very, very interesting, especially since Joe Mixon might be back to give that Texans offense a little bit of a boost. And it'll be very interesting. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think this is an interesting. I think this is an interesting matchup, nonetheless. If I had to think about it, I think this is my Inferno 5 favorite pick right here. Would be the Texans and the Bills. I really think that because I just think I love the point with the favorite because I do feel like, I mean, you got to think the Bills got humiliated last week against the Baltimore Ravens. They want nothing more than to come back, rebound, and be a completely better team. So that's why I'm like, look, as much as I have love for the Houston Texans, and they are doing very well, I just don't know if they are really prepared for this kind of matchup. Every single game this year has been so situational. I don't get it. Like I've never understood it, but it's working, and many of the situations are being tested by coaches, whether they are still the coach or they are very much ready to be out the door. But this is definitely a matchup. I don't think people anticipated it this much, but this is very much a game that I think many people are going to really pay attention to. Mark my words on it.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, wow. It's interesting. But, yeah. And like I said, man, I mean, the postseason baseball and NFL matchups, I mean, this is arguably, and then we got basketball and hockey around the corner right now.
I know.
So
all four major sports are going to be playing here very shortly. So.
We are going to be busy in Sports Wave Network. I promise you. We'll be very, very busy to this point. So, but we are all here for it. So, yeah, it's going to be a wild ride, but we're going to be busy, but we're going to tackle it on. We're going to go through the grind. We're going to go through the motions. But, you know, in the end, we're all here giving at least the best quality content for all of our shows and all of our social media posts as well. All right. For Chase and myself, that's going to do it here on the show. Appreciate all of you guys for joining on in and hanging out with all of us here. Like, follow, subscribe, and hit the bell button. Keep you up to date on future and past shows. We got our show Friday. I thought, honestly, I was going to end up doing the Prime Predictions. I'm going to probably save that for Friday. So, because, again, I think the Thursday night matchup that we got, I'm taking the Falcons up here in this one because being up at home, I'm not disregarding that defense. Hopefully, Kirk Cousins and that offense can figure it out. But I think they will. I mean, listen, with the way the Bucs played against that Bronco defense, I mean, this was before they faced Philly. I mean, Philly couldn't even get any sort of pressure. They couldn't figure it out. They were a mess. But I think with what I've seen with the Falcons, that defense clearly can play. And I just think it's a wonky matchup. NFC South rivals. I just think Atlanta, comfortable at home. I see them maybe taking this one. It'd be interesting.
It's possible, but we'll see. They've been playing bad the past couple weeks, so.
Oh, yeah. Well, appreciate everybody for joining on in. Prime Predictions Friday. You don't want to miss Friday's show. We will see you guys soon here on the show. Take care, everybody.